Today, I'd like to talk about one of my favorite players in professional basketball, one of my favorite athletes of all, Steve Nash. Today's topic is the former teammates of Steve Nash who have won an NBA championship. We're going to exclude Steve Nash's coaching years for purposes of this video, but we are going to include all the players who he played with who, after playing with him, went on to see the, what do you call it, the Holy Land, the Promised Land. They actually won championships after having played with Steve Nash. Player number one on this list is Leandro Barbosa, a Brazilian-born player who was good enough to make it to the NBA. His nickname was the Brazilian Blur, and after playing numerous seasons with the Phoenix Suns with Steve Nash, he wound up leaving and playing with the Golden State Warriors and realizing an NBA championship with them. I just think that's funny. That's exactly the point of this video. The next player on our list is Boris Diaw. He was a French-born player who was good enough to make it to the NBA. He was very tall. He was highly versatile. He had a good outside shot. And after playing numerous seasons with Steve Nash and winning many games in the regular season and winning numerous playoff series, like in the Steve Nash years in Phoenix, the Suns were a lock to make the Western Conference Finals. I think Steve Nash played in about 4 or 5 Western Conference Finals without ever qualifying for the finals. So after Boris Diaw left the Suns, he went to San Antonio, and that was where he won a championship with them. Which brings us neatly along to our next player on this list. His name is Michael Finley. He was actually drafted by the Suns, while Charles Barkley played for the Suns. He was one of their defensive specialists. He had ankle problems. He participated in numerous slam dunk contests. He was the runner-up in more than one slam dunk contest, including losing one to Kobe Bryant, who we'll get to soon as another former teammate of Steve Nash. But Michael Finley finally left the Suns, and he too, like Boris Diaw, went to the San Antonio Spurs. I think he only played about 3 seasons for them, but in one of those seasons, they won the championship. Way to go, Michael Finley. And then we get to Dirk Nowitzki. Early in Steve Nash's career, he was traded from the Phoenix Suns to the Dallas Mavericks in a certain particular trade package. When he arrived in Dallas, Steve Nash was immediately greeted as a Canadian. He was greeted by the German Dirk Nowitzki, another foreign man who was also very good to make the NBA, and the two forged a tremendous relationship and a best friends type of friendship. Steve Nash and Dirk Nowitzki were Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, minus the 6 championships. And they would have regular one-on-one games after practice. Steve Nash was like 6'3", and Dirk Nowitzki was 7 feet. So how are you going to guard all that height? but still, the point was they really hit it off and really appreciated each other. And the reason why Steve Nash eventually left the Mavericks is because the Suns would offer him a bigger contract than Mark Cuban and the Dallas Mavericks would. So Steve Nash left the Mavericks after having been traded there, and after having been a best friend to Dirk Nowitzki, he went back to Phoenix, where he never even sold his home in the first place, and won 2 MVPs. In the meantime, Dirk Nowitzki went to 2 finals, losing 1 and winning 1, and stood as a champion. Dirk Nowitzki as the MVP of the finals. If you remember that particular series, you might remember how blank Dirk looked because Steve Nash wasn't there. That sure, he had accomplished and realized a whole lot of his hopes and dreams, but he was doing it without his best cohort. It's sort of like if your wife dies and then suddenly you win an Oscar. Does it mean as much as it would have? Maybe that's a bad analogy. So that's Dirk Nowitzki. The next name on the list is actually Sean Marion, and he was nicknamed the Matrix while he had Steve Nash as a teammate while Steve Nash was winning his 2 MVPs. Then Sean Marion actually left the Suns and went to Dallas and was on that team with Dirk Nowitzki that went to the finals and beat LeBron and the Miami Heat to take the title back to Dallas. Sean Marion, of all people, the Matrix. He had the weirdest shooting form. He had the strangest look about it, and he is one of Steve Nash's many former teammates who went on and won a title. The next name on the list is none other than Amar'e Stoudemire. Yes, the Amar'e Stoudemire. He was drafted by the Suns. He came into Steve Nash's Suns. He was an absolute monster, rebounding and grabbing alley-oops to dunk him down. He was running pick and rolls with Steve Nash like Karl Malone and John Stockton. And even on Shaq and Kobe. And a lot of people don't know this, but after his NBA career, because Amar'e Stoudemire eventually left the Suns to go to the New York Knicks, and then he left the NBA to go play for the Israeli League, and I think it was for Jerusalem. He actually played for the Jerusalem Dragons, or I'm actually not sure what their team is named. And at the end of their postseason tournament, Stoudemire was on the winning team, meaning he himself has won a championship after having been teammates with Steve Nash. Amar'e Stoudemire has this sneaking suspicion that he comes from Jewish descent. That's why his last name is Stoudemire. The next name on the list is, well, here we transition. Those were teammates of Steve Nash before they ever won a title. And after having been teammates with Steve Nash, they went to other places and won the title. The next group of names on this list is actually people who had already won a title and later became teammates of Steve Nash. Name number one is Shaquille O'Neal. Briefly, if you recall, he played for the Phoenix Suns. He brought all of his championship experience and he came in. And he looked like the perfect fit between Amar'e Stoudemire and Steve Nash. And if you recall the statistics, every time Shaquille and Amar'e took the court together, Amar'e Stoudemire went off for like 40 points per game because the presence of Shaq was drawing so much attention from opposing defenses. Steve Nash was his normal self, his normal two-time MVP self, and Amar'e Stoudemire was absolutely Spider-Man. He was unstoppable. Shaq himself, he was doing okay and the Suns were winning games. By the time that team in Shaq's one season with the Suns made it to the playoffs, Amar'e had that hurt eyeball thing. That was when Amar'e learned to start wearing goggles. If you remember, he had the big knee injury that took him out for 2 seasons, and he also had an eye injury there at the end of that season with Shaq. So they made the first round, and they faced the Spurs, and Amar'e wasn't there to help, and Steve Nash and Shaq really couldn't do much against the dynasty that was the Tim Duncan Spurs, so they were quickly dispatched. The next name on the list is actually Dwight Howard. Steve Nash and Dwight Howard were teammates on the Lakers for 1 season. Dwight Howard had already appeared in the finals with the Orlando Magic, and in his original season, when he wore number 12 for the Lakers, they didn't really do too well. I think they did make the playoffs barely. Kobe ruptured his Achilles right at the end of the season because he had been so overplayed by Coach D'Antoni in those days, and the Lakers were quickly dispatched in the first round, but they had made the postseason, and then Dwight left the team, and then Steve Nash left the team, and then I think Mike D'Antoni left the team, and so that was too bad. But the thing is, later Dwight, after bouncing around the league with a couple of teams, came back and played for the Lakers again and won the championship. That was the bubble team. He was the one guy who could slow Jokic down when they were playing the Denver Nuggets in the Western Conference Finals there in the bubble. It was him and JaVale McGee who were able to actually slow Jokic down enough that the Lakers won the series in what they call a gentleman's sweep of 5 games. And the last name on the list is one Kobe Bryant. He had won 5 championships before Steve Nash became his teammate. My belief in those days was Kobe had his eye on 5 more championships. Suddenly, Ron Artest, Metta World Peace, Dwight Howard, and Steve Nash were all on the team with the Lakers. And it simply didn't work out. It simply, Phil Jackson was slated to come in and be the head coach. Instead, he went to be the GM for the New York Knicks. I guess everybody was happy, and the Lakers didn't do too well. But Kobe Bryant had won a ton of championships and had his eye on a ton more. But this new team didn't shape up. They didn't work out. And that was too bad. At least for all the Steve Nash fans. So, Canada, and all you basketball fans out there, I can only say there's a ton of people who have played with and in and around Steve Nash, and later, after being teammates with him, or before having been teammates with him, actually achieved that championship coveted goal. Have a good night.